Okay, we want to thank everybody for joining us on this Bible study this Wednesday. Tonight we're going to talk about the Feast of Passover and Everlasting Commandment. This is part one. We look to go about maybe 5 to 6 lessons on this. So this is an extensive lesson on the Passover. It's going to give you a great background on the Passover and all the ordinances and the various things that surround the Passover. So I want you to sit back, relax. If you have a pen and paper, take notes. And it's important that you get a good understanding of this first Bible study as we build off of this particular one. No part of this publication may be reproduced or retransmitted without the express written consent of Beyth-el Temple Inc. of Chicago, which is under the leadership of Dr. Chief Apostle Yehokanah B. Amon. The information that you're about to be presented is not independent of Beyth-el Temple Inc. of Chicago or Dr. Amon, who through revelational research, which includes biblical hermeneutics, has discovered the ancient biblical principles that were once kept by the prophets of old and later by Christ in the New Testament. These same principles were taught to the disciples by the Messiah, who then commanded them to go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. We have our 2 parts as we do every week. Part 1 is lecture. Everyone should be muted. And then we're going to open it up for questions and answers for part 2. So we want to go ahead and get started with our objective. Minister Al, myself, and Elder Avery. We have a number of different objectives on tonight. The first thing we want to do is to identify the Passover as an everlasting covenant instituted by God for his people worldwide. We're going to explain how the enemy has gradually substituted the Easter holiday in place of the Passover holy day. And we're going to explain how the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread are different names for the same feast. So these are our main objectives on today. So Elder Avery, we'll go ahead and get started with you. Why is the Biblical Festival of Passover, why is this so difficult for people today to understand?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I'd like to start off by saying that the Passover has a number of meanings. Now, if we look at the caption here, it says, did you know that the word Passover is used throughout the Bible in at least 7 different ways? So when we read the Bible, what that means is we're going to find the Passover used in different ways. And if we are a reader that assumes that it's always used the same way, we're going to run into trouble. So because most believers are unaware of the comprehensive use of the word Passover, they are more likely to misinterpret the Bible where the word Passover is concerned. Now, even though the Passover was celebrated in both the Old and the New Testament, most believers think of it only as an Old Testament celebration. So they tend to neglect the fact that it's also in the New Testament. Now, exactly how does the Bible use the word Passover? And that's what we're going to begin with. Its first 3 uses can be found in the 12th chapter of the book of Exodus. And if we start off with its first use, it describes the word Passover as a male lamb of the first year. Now, this memorial lamb, and we want to refer to this lamb as a memorial lamb, had nothing to do with a sacrifice for sin. And if we just continue and remember the usage as we go, we'll get an understanding of what the Bible is actually saying.
Okay. And in the Hebrew language, and I think it does a little in the Greek as well, it does something that we don't hardly see in the English language. It uses words, and it has multiple definitions. And I know that we do so in the English language, but not so much in the Hebrew. And it is important as we base our lesson around the Passover that we understand the different usages of the word in order to correctly interpret what the Bible is saying. So, Elder, you brought up, go ahead.
Yes. No, go right ahead.
You talked about a male lamb of the first year. And we have here in Exodus, the 12th chapter, verse 3 to 11, as it discusses the male lamb. I'm going to go ahead and read this Bible verse. If you want to make some comments on it. It says, "Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your account for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish." So now we're starting to go into some characteristics or some ordinances concerning the lamb. "A male of the first year." So now it's giving us a time period on how old this male lamb should be. "Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month." So we see before the Passover, they're separating this particular lamb from all the other lambs. Okay. "And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two posts, and on the upper doorposts of the houses wherein they shall eat it. And they," now we said eat it, okay? "And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire, his head, with his legs, and with the purtenance thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire." So it's going through the whole, from the time you take the lamb out from among the other lambs to the time you roast it, to how you should eat it, to what you should do afterwards if you don't eat it all. "And thus shall ye eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Yahweh's Passover." So this is from Exodus, the 12th chapter, verse 3 through 11. Okay, hold on one second, Elder. Let me take you off here. All right, Elder, can you hear me?
If anyone got lost while we were reading, it started out talking about the lamb, but after a while, it no longer used the word lamb. It referred to it with pronoun, it. So the word "it" refers to the lamb. So as you were reading, you were supposed to understand that it was the lamb. So when it said "kill it in the evening," it's talking about the lamb. When it said "roast it," it's still talking about the lamb. So verses 3 to 11 is constantly talking about that male lamb of the first year.
Okay. And that's from Exodus, the 12th chapter, verse 3 through 11. The readers can also look at Exodus, the 34th chapter, verse 25, Deuteronomy 16:2, as well as 2 Chronicles, the 35th chapter, verse 17, and 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter, verse 21. And finally, in Luke, the 22nd chapter, verse 7. All these Bible verses here refer to this male lamb of the first year, okay? So one thing that I want you to do, if you're taking notes, we can write down male lamb, first year, and this is the lamb that they're consuming or that they're eating. The second use of the word Passover. So, Elder, we talked about the first use of the word Passover. Can you go ahead and talk about the second use of the word Passover?
Sure. Now, as we begin to read this second use, I want you to note how the word is used differently. So the second use of the word Passover can be seen in verses 12 and 13 of the same chapter, where it's described as an act of passing over. And what's meant by that is an exemption. So there are individuals that will be exempted from something. When we read the verse found in Exodus 12, verse 12 and 13, it says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment." And this is what El is saying he's going to do, because his people at this time are in captivity. "I am the Yahweh, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will
pass over you. In other words, I'm going to exempt you because I'm going to do something here that I don't want you to be a part of. He's actually going to do some destroying. So when he passes over you, he says, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt, that ye shall say, it is the sacrifice of Jehovah's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, which he smote when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed their head and worshiped. So this second use of the word Passover is the act of passing over or exempting his people from the plagues that he was going to bring over to Egypt.
Okay, great. So that's our second use of the word Passover. We're going to go into the third use of the word Passover. The third use of the word Passover, found in verses 26 and 27, collectively describes the Passover as the entire service, the entire festival, which includes the meal. It includes its special day and exemption and the victims associated with it. And let's look at Exodus, the 12th chapter, verse 26 through 27. It says, and it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, what mean ye by this service? So we're talking about a service. So we can't be talking about the lamb, and we cannot be talking about the night that the death angel passed over, or that act. That ye shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses. And the people bowed the head and worship. So this third Passover is referring to the entire service, and it's important that we see the question that is asked when it says, what mean ye by this service? So now the answer is going to answer, what is this service all about? Okay.
Now while we're preparing to go to the next use, if we look at it clearly, we're finding that sometimes when the word Passover is used in the Bible, it's talking about the service, everything that's involved in the service. At other times, it's being specific, and it's only talking about one thing. It may be talking about the lamb itself. It may be talking about the act of passing over or exempting them from the plagues. But the word Passover is used in more than one way, and you have to be familiar with it.
And you also can look at Exodus, the 13th chapter, verse 5 through 10. So let's look at the fourth, and we're going to talk about the fourth and the fifth use of the word Passover. Elder?
Yes. A fourth use of the word identifies Passover as the first day of the festival. Now, we're talking about the first day only. The 14th day of the month at Eve. Now, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the way it's used the fourth time. The fifth use of the word Passover indicates it as a feast of 7 days where unleavened bread is eaten. So depending on the verse you read, it may be emphasizing on the one day, the 14th day, or it may be emphasizing on all 7 days of the feast. For example, when you read Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, verse 5, it begins talking about that first day. It says, in the 14th day of the first month at Eve is, the word is means equal, is the Jehovah's Passover. So that 14th day is also called Passover, and sometimes it's just used to talk about that one day. But when you look in the book of Ezekiel, the 45th chapter and the 21st verse, it says, in the first month, in the 14th day of the month, ye shall have the Passover. And then behind it, it clearly tells you what the Passover, how it's being used, a feast of 7 days. So the Passover can be spoken of as one day, or it can be spoken of as all 7 days. But the point is, unleavened bread shall be eaten. And we should know that when we're reading certain verses, which use of the word Passover we're talking about. That last verse, again, it emphasizes the first day only. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at Eve in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Jehovah commanded Moses. So did the children of Israel. And this is important because some people, every time they see Passover, they only think one thing, and they definitely end up messing up the Bible verses because they don't know that it's used in a different way.
Great. We also have Numbers, the 28th chapter, verse 16, as well as Joshua, the 5th chapter, verse 10 and 11. The sixth use of the word Passover. Now, remember the first use of the word Passover, we talked about a male lamb. Well, here's the sixth use of the word Passover. The word Passover is also used to describe a female lamb offered as a sacrifice for sin or sanctification. This sin sacrifice, unlike the male memorial lamb, now is being clear here that the male was a memorial lamb, okay? But this female lamb was used as a sin sacrifice. It says the sin sacrifice, unlike the male memorial lamb, was a female lamb used for the purpose of cleansing the people prior to the onset of the Passover celebration. So, Elder, we can see here both the female lamb and the male lamb, and we can see the use or the biblical use for each lamb.
That's all right.
We can see in 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter, verse 3, and then we're going to go to verse 17, where it talks about the female lamb. It says, "For they could not keep it at that time because the priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently. Neither had the people gathered themselves together to Jerusalem. For there were many in the congregation that were not sanctified." That means that they were unclean. Therefore, the Levites had the charge of the killing of the Passovers for everyone that was not clean. Now, the killing of the Passovers for everyone that is not clean, what lamb was that? That was the female lamb, because this was the lamb that was used for sanctification, to sanctify them. So it's telling you why. To sanctify them unto the Jehovah. So this is our sixth use of the word Passover, Elder.
All right.
Elder, if you want to go and talk about 2 Chronicles, we're still going into the sanctification and the female lamb. We have a couple more Bible verses.
Okay. Now, again, we're using the word Passover, but we're referring to killing something. And remember when we were talking about the male lamb, it told us to kill that lamb. Okay, and that lamb was used by the word Passover. Here, we don't necessarily see the word lamb used, but we also understand that it's called Passover and that the purpose of it is for sanctifying the people from their sins. Okay, it says, "So kill the Passover and sanctify yourselves, and prepare your brethren that they may do according to the word of Jehovah by the hand of Moses." So this was something they were using to prepare themselves before they kept the Passover. So the service was prepared, and the priests stood in their place, and the Levites in their courses according to the king's commandment. And they killed the Passover. Now, you can't kill a day, so we know it's not talking about the first day. You can't kill 7 days, so we know it's not talking about the 7 days of the feast. Okay? The only type of Passover that was mentioned being killed was a lamb. And so this case, it's a female lamb, and that lamb was supposed to be killed for sanctification. I won't continue to read all of this, but down there where it's underlined, it says that they might give according to the divisions of the families of the people to offer unto the Jehovah as it is written in the book of Moses. And we'll see what that's written just momentarily. Again, at the bottom it says, "So all the service of the Jehovah was prepared the same day." Was prepared for what? To keep the Passover. So they hadn't kept the Passover. They were preparing to keep the Passover. So they had to kill a lamb to prepare for it, that female lamb, and they had to kill a lamb for a memorial, the male lamb. And we need to get an understanding of that. Also, for you New Testament buffs out there, in John the 11th chapter and the 55th verse, I think that is, says, "And the Jews' Passover was nigh at hand, and many went out of the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves." Now, the idea is the Old Testament told you how they were to purify or sanctify themselves, and they were to kill that female lamb.
Okay. Great. And we're going to take a quiz. The female lamb was used for what? And this is what should be running through your head as we go through this. For a sin sacrifice or for sanctification or for cleansing. The male lamb was used for what? This is what they roasted and they had, they ate as part of the Passover ordinance. The seventh use of the word Passover. Elder, you want to go ahead and talk about the seventh?
Why not?
Of the word Passover?
Now, we have a seventh use of the word Passover. Okay, the word Passover was also used in more than one way in the New Testament. But specifically in 1 Corinthians, the 5th chapter and the 7th verse, the Passover was described as Christ. And just hold on to your seats because this is where most people have their problem.
Yes.
Under the new covenant, Christ was offered as an eternal sacrifice price for sin. And the point being is that there came a point where animal sacrifices were no longer required. So Christ became that eternal sacrifice. So under the new covenant, he replaced the animal sacrifice, that female lamb, found in 2 Chronicles 33 and 17 and 2 Chronicles 35, 6, 10, 11, and 16. And this is what 1 Corinthians says. "Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ, our Passover," and you can see here that Christ is being used as the Passover, right, because Christ is our Passover, right, is sanctified and is sacrificed, for us. So Christ died for us. Okay, the Bible tells us in the Old Testament, by his stripes we were healed. Now, but then it goes on, it says, "Therefore let us keep the feast." And this confuses the heck out of people because they think because Christ is our Passover, we don't have to keep the feast.
Right.
But the writer is making sure that you're clear on that because he says, "Therefore let us keep the feast." But people don't bother to read this verse, verse 8. They only read verse 7 because they want people to believe that the Passover is no longer necessary. So remember this, "Therefore let us keep the Passover, not with the old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth." And if you take the time to read that entire chapter, you'll see that it's talking about sin. And that was the lamb, that female lamb that he took the place of, and he became our sin sacrifice. And we can read other verses that will let you know that Christ was actually being sacrificed for sin. Okay. And would you pick that up from there for me, Minister?
Sure. I'm sorry, Matthew, the 1st chapter, verse 21. It says, "And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Yahshua." We had Jesus in English. "For he shall save his people from their sins."
That's
so
all right.
we see that the one who came was responsible for saving his people from their sins. And so far, if you want to grasp on to something that's extremely important, and if I stop midway through and give you a quiz, it's important that you know that these two lambs, this is something you're going to hear for the next several weeks on the Shabbat, so you might as well get it clear now. These two lambs, know what both lambs were. The male lamb was the memorial lamb, and we're going to talk about that here in just a minute, what memorial means. And that lamb was used to roast, and I know I'm being redundant. And this is the lamb that was part of the Passover. You had the female lamb that was sacrificed for our sins. Okay? So when Christ came, what lamb did he replace? Okay? If he died for our sins, that means he replaced the female lamb. All right? And it's important, as Elder Avery said, verse 8, they always leave out, oh, Christ is my Passover, so we don't have to keep the Passover. But they never read, therefore, let us keep the feast. All right? So it's important that you read those two Bible verses together. And
now,
lastly,
if I can just jump back in quickly, this last verse in John, the first chapter, verse 29, lets us know why we said that he took the place of that lamb. And it reads like this. The next day, John seeth Yahshua, who is Jesus, coming unto him, and said, Behold, the Lamb of El. So the Bible even depicts him as a lamb. But this lamb, says, which taketh away the sins of the world. So he replaced that lamb that was used for purification, that was used for the removal or a sacrifice for their sins.
Okay, great. A brief summary of the exhaustive use of the word Passover. So we have 7 types of Passovers that we discussed, and this chart is very good, Elder. If we want to just go ahead and talk a little bit about this chart, this is what we've just went through. Although we didn't read all the Bible verses, we have the different types of Passover. We have the descriptions and we have the verses. So, Elder, if you want to talk a little bit about this chart.
Right, and as I'm talking, perhaps you can jot down these verses. The first 2 Passovers that we have on this chart refer to actual animals that were taken from the sheep or among the goats. They were lambs. One was a male lamb of the first year. The other was a female sacrificial lamb that was for the cleansing of the people. Now, we put, for the third example, Christ, simply because he replaced that female lamb. And Christ, the Bible says, is our Passover, who was sacrificed for our sins. And this sort of helps you to sort of get it into perspective. Well, the Passover refers to also an act of passing over or exempting you from the plagues that he brought upon Egypt. The Passover actually refers to the entire service. So in this case, it refers to every one of the usages that we have here together in the service. However, we're actually talking about Christ, though, and not that animal. Okay, it also refers to the 14th day only. Sometimes it's only talking about or focusing on the 14th day. And Passover also is used to refer to all 7 days of the festival. So you can see how people might get the subject of Passover thoroughly mixed up. Because when they read a particular verse, if they only think of one definition, then they're going to misinterpret what the Bible is saying. And 1 Corinthians 5 and 7 is one of the most commonly misunderstood passages, because people have said, because of it, we don't have to keep the Passover feast. And that's not what the writer said.
Right. And I want to know if everyone can hear me okay. Can you hear me okay, Elder?
I hear you well.
Okay. Can somebody else let me know in the chat room if they can hear me okay, or if I'm sounding a little low? So there are more. Yes, I'm low, or yes, you can hear me. Okay.
Perhaps I might be a little bit low. I'll speak up because I'm actually on the phone.
No, you're fine. And there are more Bible verses that we have that shows like the animals, or show Christ, or show the services. But we just want to present a few Bible verses to show you. So it's important when we read throughout the entire Bible of Passover that we know exactly which Passover we're referring to. Is there another way to prove, Elder, that the Passover was described this comprehensively?
And there certainly is, and we're going to actually present that now. Actually, the Hebrew Chaldee and the Greek dictionaries, you'll find them in the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance of the Bible. They provide the original Hebrew and the original Greek words that's used for the word Passover, along with their definitions. If we look at the Hebrew Chaldee Dictionary of the Old Testament, because the Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew, under the number 6453, it refers to it as the Passover as a pretermission, and i.e. means example. The example is an exemption. So remember when we were talking about one use of the word Passover is an exemption? Okay, that's one. It says it's used only technically of the Jewish Passover. Then it says the festival. The festival covers those multiple uses. Then it says, or the victim. Well, there were actually 3 victims of the Passover. The victims are the lambs that were killed. Well, we have the male lamb that was killed for the supper, the Passover meal. We had the female lamb that was killed for the sacrificing of sin. And then we have Christ who replaced that female lamb, who we all know died for our sins. So that's what we find in the Hebrew dictionary, and that covers basically all of those definitions. But when we look at the Greek dictionary of the Old Testament, it's recording in number 3957. It first of all lets you know that it's talking about the Passover, and it says of Chaldean origin. So this Greek word is referring back to that Hebrew. Right. And it says if you compare it with Pesach, which is the Hebrew word for Passover, it says the Passover, the meal, the day, and of course when it's talking about the day, it's talking about the days as well, the festival, which is everything that's involved in it, or the special sacrifices, which the Hebrew refers to as the victims connected with it. And then it has something quite unusual. It says Easter, and then it says Passover. And we'll be explaining to you shortly why it says Easter.
Great. Why did the Hebrew Chaldean Dictionary identify, Elder, the Passover as Easter? And I think this is important because if you have some people who celebrate Easter, they'll go to that one place in the Bible, in the book of Acts, the 12th chapter, and say, well, they talked about Easter here. But why does it do that here in the Bible?
Well, not only did the Hebrew Chaldee Dictionary identify Easter in conjunction with the Passover, some biblical translations do the same. So as you were just referring to, Acts, the 12th chapter and the 4th verse, uses the translation, it uses Easter. So even until this day, Easter and Passover are celebrated during the same season. So when we get ready to celebrate the Passover, during the Passover, those 7 days of the Passover, Easter this year will fall right in between it. Now, early Christian believers celebrated the Passover festival according to the commandments of Moses until the observance was later moved to Sunday. Now, we tell you often that the Apostle Paul wrote that after my departure, grievous wolves are going to enter into the church, not sparing the flock. And what happened when the apostles died off, others took over claiming to be leaders. They called themselves popes. And you don't even find the word pope in the Bible, but nevertheless, they took over. And eventually, they moved the Passover festival to Sunday. So the early Christians actually kept the Passover. But eventually they got to the point where they wanted to distance themselves from the Jews, and they began to call it Easter. And they began to change the ordinances of the Passover to what we have today as Easter. Now, I don't want anyone to get the misunderstanding that Easter, as it's celebrated today, is the Passover. But early on, when they celebrated the Passover, or when they celebrated Easter, they celebrated the way that they celebrate Passover. So under the Greco-Roman government, its ordinances were changed. And for this reason, the word Passover and Easter were perceived as being synonymous, because they were. They were, because Easter was actually celebrated as the Passover in the beginning until they made the changes. Now, eventually the Passover and Easter were used interchangeably, and that's why you will find that some of these translators, instead of writing Passover, they'll write Easter. So we shouldn't let that upset us, and we should be able to explain that to people who need to know, why is Easter written in the Bible if the disciples never celebrated Easter like we celebrate it today? And so when we look at that particular chapter of Acts, it says, now about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. Now we clearly can see what we're talking about, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the Passover. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. So we clearly see that it's talking about the Passover, but because some of the translators understood that Easter was another word that was used for Passover when it was originally celebrated, they just translated it as Easter. So that's not a big deal. We can explain why Easter appears there, and it only appears one time when we look in certain translations of the Bible. Right. But that's why Easter is there, and that's what people will use. They'll take that verse out of all the verses in the Bible to try to condone the Easter celebration as they celebrate it today, and that's dead wrong.
Okay. And in this particular Bible study, we didn't go into the origin or history of the word Easter and the origin of that particular feast. But as Elder said, in Acts 12, chapter 1 through 4, it's the only place where you see in the King James Version of the Bible this word Easter. If you look up this word, and I'm going to just spend just a couple of minutes here, in Acts the 12th chapter, verse 4, let me get my highlighter here. You can see that the word Easter, okay, is found under 3957 of the Greek. But if you go to 3957 of the Greek, you'll see that the transliteration is Pascha. And if you go further down and look at the definition, the way it's used in the Bible, now this is the word Easter, it tells you that it's the Passover sacrifice. It gives a number of different definitions, the Passover lamb. So we can see that this particular word, Pascha, which we see in our Bible as Easter, is actually the Passover. But the translators translated this word Pascha into the word Easter. Okay?
Now, but before you go on, I want people to clearly understand this, because people will try to tempt you with this particular verse and say, ooh, look, the translator made a mistake. The translators did not make a mistake. What they did is they took the word Easter, which at that time was used synonymously with the Passover, right, and celebrated just like the Passover was celebrated, and they translated. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't the best use of the word, but right, it was a translation that was correct. You just have to be able to explain it.
Okay. How can you be certain that Christ did not replace the Passover celebration? You know, Elder, we had 1 Corinthians, I believe it was 5, 7, and 8. But although we showed what that meant, there's a lot of people who say that Christ was our Passover, and so we no longer have to celebrate this feast. So how are we certain that he didn't replace the Passover celebration?
Well, since we went over this already, I'd just like to give the short version. The writer didn't stop by saying that Christ is our Passover. He said, therefore, let us keep the feast. So if he told us to keep the feast, we should find ourselves keeping the feast, because this is one of the writers, the Apostle Paul, who is giving us the commandments of Jehovah, so we're to keep the feast. And we're going to see later on a number of different reasons why we still have to celebrate the Passover. So let's not run away and say, well, maybe there's some truth to that. We shouldn't keep the feast. Here in the words of the Bible, it says, therefore let us keep the feast.
All right.
So he did not replace the Passover celebration, even though he replaced that particular female lamb, that lamb that was a sacrifice for sin. We don't have to offer up animal sacrifices anymore because Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast.
Okay. New Testament Bible verse. Are there any other reasons why Christ could not have replaced the Passover celebration?
That's all right. Now, the Passover festival was instituted by El. And how did he institute it? As an everlasting feast. Now, we know what the word forever means. We should know what the word everlasting means, or perpetual. But that means that this feast has no end, and we'll continue to celebrate this feast. Therefore, Christ could not have replaced the celebration without contradicting the rest of the Bible. If the Old Testament told you that the celebration was everlasting, and Christ come and replace it and basically tell us that we don't have to do it anymore, that would be a contradiction. But notice 1 Corinthians does not say any such thing. But let's look at what the Bible does say in the Old Testament. And this day shall be unto you, talking about the Passover, for a memorial. So not only is the lamb a memorial, the day, everything about the day is a memorial. And ye shall keep it. Keep what? There's that word it again, referring back to what? The day. A feast to the Jehovah throughout your generations. That's one way of saying forever. So that as long as El has a people, you have to keep the feast. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. Now, do something with the word forever. 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread, even from the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses. In other words, on that first day you shouldn't even have leaven in your house. For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. If you want to be Israel, we got all these brothers running around saying, oh, I'm Israel, and they eat more leaven than you can bake. And in the first day there shall be a holy convocation. People don't know what that is. How are you going to have the Passover when you don't know what a holy convocation is? And in the seventh day there shall be a holy convocation unto you. No manner of work shall be done in them. And we find people going on their jobs every day just like it's a regular day. Save that which every man must eat. Now, any work that you do, make sure it's that lamb that you must eat, that male lamb. And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. No, didn't it start off talking about the Passover?
Yes.
Then it must be telling you that the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread is the same.
Right.
For in the selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. The Bible is being redundant because you need to know that there is no end to this feast. Don't let somebody convince you that you don't have to keep the Passover.
Right. That's beautiful. And there's a couple of key phrases and words in here. It's a memorial. So what is a memorial? What do you do as a memorial?
All right.
It's something that you acknowledge, or it's something that you do from year to year. And we know that this memorial is a commandment from year to year because the Bible says that we ought to do it on this day forever. Okay?
That's
so,
all right.
We have to understand what certain words mean. And people say, well, we don't have to keep the Passover because we don't have to sacrifice a lamb for sin, or we don't have to sacrifice anything for sin. And what is your response?
Okay, so Christ. That's what we should say. Christ is our Passover. That's what the Bible says.
That's right. And that's why we don't sacrifice a lamb for sin. Okay?
We just don't sacrifice that animal lamb for sin.
Right. Are there any other reasons why Christ could not have replaced the Passover celebration?
Well, go ahead. Why don't you read that for us?
The Bible identifies the Passover and numerous other feast days as his feast. Easter, as it is celebrated today, is a man-made festival. The Easter eggs and all the things that go along with it, and you have things that lead up to it. Palm Sunday, while that's not in the Bible, but everybody who celebrates Easter the way they do today celebrate Palm Sunday. You have a lot of people who celebrate Ash Wednesday. Believers, if they are true believers, ought to serve El rather than man. So we have a couple of Bible verses. Elder says, "And Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of the Jehovah, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts." This is found in Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, verse 1 through 2. And it's so important, and this is going to be a shocker for a lot of people who say that they celebrate the feast day, that it's a holy convocation. Okay, so we've had a Bible study on that. We don't want to go into that on today, but it's a holy convocation. Also, Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, verse 5 through 8 says, "In the 14th day of the first month at the even is the Jehovah's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Jehovah. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. But ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Jehovah 7 days. In the 7th day is a holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein." So part of the mystery of the Passover is the holy convocation on the first day and the last day. And finally, Elder, I think this is our last verse, Joshua, the 24th chapter, verse 15 says, "And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Jehovah, choose ye this day whom ye will serve." And so the Bible gives us a number of different verses to tell us that this Passover is still binding today. And I'm sorry, the last verse we have is Acts, the 5th chapter, verse 29. "Then Peter and other apostles answered and said, We ought to obey El rather than man." So, Elder, we have a number of different Bible verses here. Did you want to comment on a few of these before we move on?
Well, I mean, they're pretty much self-explanatory. Well, you have to make up your mind who you're going to serve. Are you going to celebrate Easter that was made by man? Easter is a holiday. Passover is a holy day. "Choose ye this day whom ye shall serve." And you ought to obey El rather than man.
Great. Elder, if you want to take this one, let's give some more reasons. Are there any other reasons why Christ could not?
Now, here's a point thing. When we look at those 7 uses of the word Passover, Christ is neither a day nor a service. How is he going to take the place of a day when he's not a day? Can he take the place of a service when he's not a service? He is not a meal or an exemption. Okay, at least not the Passover meal, because we do have a meal that we consume during the communion, but that's on Passover as well. However, of the 7 uses of the word Passover, Christ is depicted as the Lamb of El. Unlike the memorial lamb of the Passover celebration, but like the lamb offered as a sacrifice for sin. He took away the sins of his people. And both the Old and the New Testament describe him as a sacrifice for sin. Okay? And so when they were doing it in the Old Testament, that was simply typical of Christ. And that's why he gave us that, so that we could learn from it and be able to accept Christ as our sacrifice. So this is how the early church depicted Christ as our Passover. Not as the feast day, but as that lamb sacrificed for sin. And when we read the verse, John 1:29, which we read earlier, "Behold the Lamb of El, which taketh away the sins of the world." And throughout the Bible, in various places, Christ is depicted as the Lamb of El. And this is why he could take the place of that sacrificial lamb for sin.
Great. Let's talk about some more reasons why Christ could not replace the Passover celebration. And we see here in Isaiah, Elder, if you want to talk about Isaiah, the 53rd chapter, we can kind of sum this up.
Yeah, well, let's just sort of sum it up and with the information in red, because we know that he bore our griefs and he carried our sorrows. But the Bible tells us that he was smitten of El. And he was wounded for our transgressions, and he was bruised for our iniquity. So even the Old Testament agrees with the New Testament with regard to Christ. The only difference is it doesn't give you the name right here. But this is a prophecy. Now, if you read down further, it says, and the Yahweh hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. It also says he is brought as a lamb, and that's why he's depicted as a lamb in the New Testament, to the slaughter. Yet it pleased Jehovah to bruise him. He has put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin. Well, that old lamb was offered for sin. The Old Testament is telling you, by way of prophecy, that there's going to be this individual that's going to be an offering for sin. And we don't have to worry about that lamb that we had back there that was an offering for sin. He shall see of the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servants justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. A little bit further down, because he has poured out his soul unto death, and he bare the sins of many. So, I mean, how clearer can the Bible make it in the Old as well as in the New Testament that he did not replace the Passover festival? He only replaced that lamb. And that's why he's depicted as a lamb in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament.
That's beautiful, Elder. We're going to go a couple of more, and we're showing more and more reasons why Christ could not replace the Passover celebration. All right. Christ is also our perfect example. People always say, well, Christ is our example. Oh, he's our perfect example. Therefore, we should walk even as he walked. Now, if he's our example, how come we don't use him as an example? Christ kept the Passover, and he commanded his followers to teach whatsoever he had commanded. And I don't know, I'm going to jump ahead of myself. You know, in the Bible, we know that Christ taught the disciples, and before he left, I think it was that night or later on that he was killed. So he commanded them to go into all nations and teach whatsoever he commanded. So why would Christ teach his disciples about the Passover? And he introduced, we're going to talk a minute here about something else. He introduced a few other things at the Passover. Commanded them to go and teach all nations, but then after he died, the Passover is no longer binding. It doesn't make sense.
It just doesn't make sense.
No, not at all. In 1 John, the 2nd chapter, verse 6, it says, he that said he abideth in him ought himself also so to walk, even as he walked. In Matthew, the 26th chapter, verse 18, it says, and he said, go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, the master saith, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. Your perfect example kept the Passover. Okay? And lastly, in Mark, the 14th chapter, verse 12 and 14, it says, and the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover. They're not talking about Christ. And we're going to see as we continue to read, they're not talking about the day. His disciples said unto him, where wilt thou that we go and prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover? Remember, Christ was used as a Passover? They didn't eat Christ. Okay? They ate a memorial lamb. And wheresoever he shall go, and say ye to the good man of the house, the master saith, where is the guest chamber, where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples. Now, remember that the memorial lamb was roasted. Remember, it was a memorial. This is in the Old Testament, thousands of years before this time. And here we go, thousands of years back into the future, where we see Christ is doing the same thing that was commanded in the Old Testament, that they roasted a lamb, had nothing to do with sin. And they prepared this Passover, and he ate it with his disciples. The world act like this is something strange. They go, now they may not kill it unless they're in the South. They go kill a pig to get a Christmas ham. They get a turkey. Where do you think the world got their meats for these holidays? From the Passover. So, Elder?
It's all right. We just need to believe the Bible. I constantly quote the verse where it says, let El be true and every man a liar. We seem to just want to make El into a lie, and every man, everything he says got to be true. Well, I read this. Well, I don't care what you read somewhere. If you believe the Bible, believe what the Word said.
Okay. All right. Are there any other reasons why Christ, I think this is beautiful here, Elder, why Christ could not replace the Passover celebration? And this is what I was speaking of earlier, that there were some things that Christ introduced at this Passover. Christ introduced the communion festival during the Passover festival. Remember, this was the appointed time. Today, many within the Christian community believe that communion is still binding, which it is. Since communion is forever, and it was introduced during the Passover festival on the first night, then Passover must be forever. So how can you, we're going to go into next week, we're going to talk a lot about communion and how it is integrated with the Passover. And if they believe in communion, Elder, how come they don't believe in Passover? Because of this word often. And how as often. And I don't want to talk about that much because we're going to go into that next week. But it was on the same night of the Passover. In the book of Matthew, the 26th chapter, verse 26 through 28, it said, and as they were eating, so they were having the Passover meal. Read the 26th chapter of Matthew. As they were eating, Yahshua, which is Jesus, he took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks. So we see here, Elder, that Christ introduced communion at the Passover. We're going to talk a lot about that, but the people believe in communion. They must believe in the Passover as well.
All right.
Elder, did the early Christian believers observe the Passover?
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier, is that the early Christians kept the Passover. And when we talk about the word Christian, we're not talking about Christianity. Christianity is a religion. I'm talking about those that were called Christians. The Bible said that, and it was talking about the Jews, the disciples, that they were called Christians first at Antioch. But we need to understand that when they were called Christians, they weren't called part of a religion. They were called Christians because they were like Christ. Now, but in the 2nd century, it was reported that Passover was an annual event and that it was held at night. Okay, and that was the fact because it's celebrated in the eve. The Apocryphal New Testament, a collection of apocryphal Christian literature, is an English translation reprint edition. Oxford University Press. The Eastern Orthodox realize that this is so, as one of their priests has written. Pesach, which is here Pascha, is the feast of universal redemption. Now, this is what they're saying. This is not what I'm saying. This is what they're saying. Our earliest sources for the annual celebration of the Christian Pesach came to us from the 2nd century. The feast, however, and they're talking about Passover, they're using the Hebrew word or using this word, so you won't be able to identify that they're talking about the Passover. But we gave you the Hebrew word, so you should be able to identify it. The feast, however, must have originated in the apostolic period. this is what they're saying. The Passover didn't originate in the apostolic period because it was actually kept in the Old Testament. According to the earliest documents, Pascha is described as a nocturnal celebration. Again, nocturnal refers to night, so it was celebrated in the Eid. The origin of that day and Great Week, Part 1, Holy Cross Orthodox Press. So they even recognize that among Christians, and the word Christian took on a change after they were called Christians because they were at Antioch. Then later on, people took that word Christian and made it into a religion. And so Christians became people that's part of the Christian religion. But they even confess to keeping the Passover. But they're giving you the Passover by another name. It's still the Passover. And we need to understand that.
Okay. We have just probably a few more slides before we wrap up. If the Passover and the Feast Elder of Unleavened Bread refer to the same feast, how do you explain Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, verse 6? Let me go ahead and read that for you. It says, in the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread unto the Yehovah. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread.
You know what? I'd like to take the shortcut and explain it. Let's just look at what you just read. Okay. And anybody that got common sense and know how to read and don't read into it will understand it. It says, in the 14th day of the first month at even is the Yehovah's Passover. Well, the Passover is the 14th. That's one definition of it. But the Passover is also a feast of 7 days. So guess what? The 15th day of the first month is the Passover too. The 16th of that month is the Passover as well. So all 7 days is the Passover. Now we go to the next verse. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread unto the Yehovah. People think that this is a brand new feast being given in the Old Testament. Right. Simply because it says, and on the 15th day of the same month is. The word is means equal. Right. Well, isn't the 15th day the unleavened bread? It certainly is. And so is the 16th and the 17th and the 18th. So this verse is not telling you when the day starts. It's just telling you what the day is. And people read it, and they're going to tell you, well, since the Passover starts on the 14th and the unleavened bread starts on the 15th, they are two different celebrations. And not a word in here tells you a start. We reading that into the verse. Stop reading it into the verse. And don't let other people do it when you're talking with them. And so that's simply the explanation. This verse don't tell you when these festivals start. In order to find out, you got to read other verses that actually tell you when the day begins. And then you will understand whether or not this is one festival or if it's two festivals.
Okay. All right. And we have some information here at the bottom, Elder. Do we want to go through those Bible verses? Okay.
Yes. Well, let's look at what the New Testament says. The New Testament is very clear on it. It says, now the Feast of Unleavened Bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover. Yeah. It's equating the two. It's saying that the Feast of Unleavened Bread is called the Passover. So they're the same. Okay? Now it says in the verse 7, it says, then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. Well, when was the Passover killed? On the 14th.
On the 14th, the first day.
So if it was killed on the 14th, and this verse says that it's the 15th, it's only telling you that the 15th is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But guess what? The 14th is too.
Right.
This verse is not telling you that this is two different feasts. It's telling you it's only one festival by more than one name.
Right. And so many people keep this as two different feast days. And you will see it on their websites or whatever that they call this first day, the Passover, and then they call the next day the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So
I'm not trying to be harsh, but some people just need to get their reading skills together, their comprehension skills. They read into stuff, and then they want to lead people.
Okay. If the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread refer to the same feast, I think, did we just go over Leviticus the 23rd?
We just did that, but that's fine. We can just move on because we're over time anyway.
Okay. Let's move on to our next one. And
this should be our last one.
Yeah, the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is an annual feast. If the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were separated festivals, the Bible would have identified 4 annual feasts in the passages below instead of 3. And so we have Deuteronomy's Elders 16 and 16.
And that's the only one we really need to read. They can read the others later. Let's just look at that. It says, 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Jehovah thy El, in the place which he shall choose. Now, it only required you 3 times every year. So these are referring to annual feasts. If the Feast of Unleavened Bread was indeed different from the Passover, it should have been 4 times. Right. But it only said 3. And then it tells you what it is. In the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the Passover, in the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Weeks in the New Testament is called Pentecost, and in the Feast of Tabernacles. Those were the 3 times that the Old Testament required you to have an annual festival. And that's because early on in the book of Deuteronomy, they only had 3 festivals. The others hadn't come out yet.
Okay. And
okay.
That's plain and clear to people. We have 3 feasts here.
This is talking about when they were actually going through the wilderness.
Right. Okay. So that's it. We want to get ready to open up. Give me 1 second. All right. We want to open up for questions and answers. And we want to reiterate that you all should go over this Bible study again, and maybe at least 2 times. We have a lot more information. Like I said, this particular study is going to go about 5 or 6 weeks, where we go into the ordinances of the Passover. I know there are many questions that some people who will be celebrating the Passover for the first time have, but we're going over the ordinances of the Passover. We're going over the communion, and we're going to really nail down this male and female lamb, something that is important that you know, and you know where they both can be found in the Bible verses. So if you take anything away from this Bible study today, Elder, is that the word Passover, in order for you to really understand the Passover, you have to understand the several uses of this word. When people go against you concerning the Passover, they're using Bible verses, and they're using Bible verse with incorrect meaning. So it's important that we know how the Passover is used. And that's our first step. That's the platform that we want to lay before we move on into other Bible studies over the next 5 weeks. But, Elder, I think it was a good study. I think that if people can really get and understand how these words are used, it'll make them be effective witnesses, and then be able to combat those people who go against Passover with these seemingly contradicting Bible verses.
That's all right.
Okay. So *6 on your phone or your keypad if you have any questions at all. Elder, what is you think that people should take away as we wait for questions from this particular Bible study? What's something that stands out that you think they should go back and focus on as they read this particular Bible study?
Well, I think that the major thing that they need to recognize is that the Passover is a mystery. What makes it a mystery? It's used at least 7 different times. So every time you read the word Passover, it's not talking about the same thing. You have to know what it's talking about. That's going to make you study, especially those of you that love to witness. You want to witness to somebody about the Passover? Go over this lesson until you know it like the back of your hand, and you'll be an effective witness.
Okay. We have a question from my sister, I believe, out of Florida. Shalom, Ms. Pawnee.
Hey there, it's actually out of Atlanta.
Out of Atlanta. It's a lot of you all. It's a lot of you all, so I couldn't tell who was calling from where.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is more of a comment. As far as you were talking about, as far as like witnessing and being able to explain the differences between Day of Unleavened Bread and Passover, I kind of broke it down more into layman's terms. It's almost like when you think about Black Friday and the day after Thanksgiving. They're the same exact day, but people use different words to describe it. So, yes, it's the day after Thanksgiving, but it's also the Black Friday holiday. So when you think about when you're witnessing or talking to people, I mean, you think of Jordans, and they call them Bones, and they call them Air Jordan. You know, you have different names for the same particular product. So you have to sometimes break it down in layman's terms for those people who may not relate to Passover or Pesach or the Day of Unleavened Bread, to make it kind of stick out in their face. So that's what stuck out to me. I guess it was more of a aha, like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
That's all right.
Good. That was a good observation. Elder, she made a good point that, I mean, for whatever reason, the Bible uses these words, different words to refer to the same day. Maybe was that Yah's plan as part of the mystery? I don't know. But nevertheless, we have to read a number of different Bible verses to see that they all mean the same thing. And if you collect all the Bible verses, you'll see that, man, why does the Bible refer to the Feast of Unleavened Bread as one day? Why does it refer to it sometimes as several days? And then you go to other places in the Bible, well, now why does it refer to the Passover as the first day? Or why does it refer to the whole feast as Passover, the 7 days? So, you know, why y'all did it that way, you know, I don't know, but, you know.
And he did it because his word is a mystery. It's not given for everybody to understand it. And those who understand it should thank him because they understand the mystery. And that's not only true of Passover, it's true of the law. Every time you see the word law, it's not talking about the same law. You have to understand how the Bible is a mystery. And when you get that mystery, you'll be a very effective witness.
Okay. So if you have any questions, any more questions, *6. We want to thank all those who joined us from Atlanta, not Florida, from Chicago, from Tennessee, as well as our dear brother there out in Toronto, Canada. Brother, thank you for joining us. Our brother in Indiana, Indiana, and our brothers in Wisconsin. And those who will be listening to us in Western Africa and UK as well. So we want to thank all of you. No more questions. *6. We're going to go ahead and get ready to conclude, and we're going to have this uploaded here probably within the next 30 minutes on our YouTube page, as well as our TV, Beyth-el.net. And so, again, we want to ask you, get those Bible verses. Look over this again. Apostle's going to ask you, where is the sacrificial lamb? Where is the female lamb found? What is it used for? Where is the male lamb at? What is that used for? Go back over this Bible study. Identify those different lambs. Get those verses and have those ready when we go through this particular class over the Shabbat. If you have any questions on this Bible study here today or in the future, we ask that you send those questions to us at BibleStudy@Beyth-el.net. We'll make sure that we reply back to you relatively quick. We definitely want you to join us. If you want to learn more about us, you go to our website, www.tvbeyth-el.net. We want you to become a member. We're broadcasting nationwide and worldwide, and we're opening up to do some big things in 2014. You won't find a church home like Beyth-el Temple and College, so definitely want you to become part of us, become a member of our team here. We want to encourage you, those who are listening for the first time and those who will listen here within the next 3 to 4 weeks, we want you to join us for Passover 2014 to the Holy Convocation, which is in Chicago, Illinois. And the Passover begins on April 12th at the going down of the sun. If you have any questions or for more information, I ask that you contact myself at 312-273-4068, or you can send an email to us at Passover2014@Beyth-el.net. If you need sleeping accommodations or don't worry about the food or anything, we just want you to come and be a part of this joyous occasion. We ask that you be here next week, 8 p.m. sharp. Elder, we're going to have a dynamic lesson part 2 on the Passover.
Oh, yes, we are.
As we go into some of the ordinances of the Passover, what makes us different, what are some of the mysteries concerning the Passover,
all right,
that shows that other people who say they're keeping the Passover are not keeping it. And so we ask that you be here at 8 p.m. sharp, and we'll be here and ready to go. So for Elder Avery and myself, we want to thank you and say bless you and have a wonderful night.
Shalom.
Shalom.